morning everyone, and welcome to a photo studio in Leighton Buzzard, where we're here today to answer a question, and not just because questions look quite good in the title of your videos. No, we're here to ask, is the new McLaren Artura a P1 for a sixth of the price? That's the new Artura, by the way. That's the P1, looking very good over there. First of all, yes, it is a sixth of the price. This is going to cost from about £182,500 when it goes on sale. A used P1 these days costs between 1.1 to 1.2 million pounds. And the other thing I should mention is that, unfortunately, no, I'm not going to be able to drive this car here today. That's going to happen around May time, COVID permitting. So really, I'm not going to be able to fully answer my own question today, am I? But what we can do is dissect the details that we know. So the headlines: this car is new, as in properly new, new from the ground up. It's a new carbon fiber tub, it's a new body, it's a new powertrain, it's a new interior, new. McLaren is even calling this car the start of a whole new era for the company. It's the start of their second decade of production, in fact, which is just crazy when you think about it, isn't it? Because going back to the MP412C, McLaren's only been in this era of producing road cars for 10 years. They've made 25,000 cars, and the improvement curve has been quite steep, hasn't it? Yes. What else can I tell you about this car? It is, and here's the big news, a plug-in hybrid. So out goes the twin-turbo V8, in comes a new 3-litre twin-turbo V6. Connected to that is a new 8-speed twin-clutch gearbox, and there's an e-diff built into the transmission. Charge it up and it will do about 30 kilometers in electric-only mode. It is rear-wheel drive. That EV range, by the way, that's about what you get with a plug-in Golf these days, isn't it? But then when you want all the power, when you want the engine and the e-motor working together, you've got 671 horsepower, 94 horsepower of which comes from the electric motor. So 0 to 62, 3 seconds flat. That's only 0.2 down on the P1 over there, and top speed 205 miles an hour. And get this, in terms of CO2 emissions, it's in line with the Dacia Sandero. Yeah, 129 grams per kilometre. More impressive still is that despite carrying around a 7.4 kilowatt-hour battery, motor and other electric gubbins, it weighs 1,495 kilograms. That's just 46 kilograms heavier than a 570S, which, let's face it, is pretty negligible. And yes, the Artura effectively replaces the 570S, aka the Sport Series family, but McLaren has had a rejig of the range, which is now bookended by the GT and Ultimate series, with the core supercars, Artura and 720S, grouped together in the middle. Okay, so we're going to come back to the Artura in a minute and give you all the details on that car, but for now we need to come over here and doff our caps to the genius that is the McLaren P1. And remind ourselves that this is a car that went into production in late 2013, over 7 years ago, which is just madness, isn't it? Because it still looks so fresh as the day it left the factory, and it's still one of the most scalpel sharp, warp speed fast supercars anywhere on the planet. For me, this was always the reprobate of the hypercar holy trinity with the LaFerrari and the 918 Spider. It was always up for a bit of a fight. And the reason we've got one here today, other than because I just want to perv over it a little bit, is to remind ourselves that the hybrid supercar formula, well, it's nothing new, is it? McLaren nailed the formula with the P1 all those years ago, but it's taken them this amount of time to distill that formula down into something more attainable, a sub 200 grand series production supercar. Yes, Honda gave us the NSX Hybrid back in 2016, and then there's the 1,000 horsepower Ferrari SF90, but it feels like the Artura is the opening of the hybrid supercar floodgates at a more approachable level. Ferrari is working on a V6 hybrid, the Huracan successor will be petrol electric, a hybrid 911 can't be far off, and in many ways the P1 is where it all started, where we all realised that hybrid tech wasn't just to let a Toyota Prius eke out every drop of petrol. It can take performance and a car's responses to a whole new level. Oh, look at that. Oh, sorry. getting a little bit distracted over here. We're here to talk about the Artura, aren't we? And let's move on to the way it looks. What do you think? It's not really my job to tell you what your eyes are telling your brain, but what I can do is point out a few different aspects of the exterior design, perhaps to help you make your mind up. The first is the headlights. So you'll notice they're recessed into the bodywork a la 720S. The Sport Series cars were always flush with the bodywork. Moving down the side, the wheels, so they're staggered, 19 inch at the front, 20 inch at the back, and you've got these Porsche 911 GT3 RS style vents on top of the front wheel arch here. That releases the pressure build up in the arch, but also adds just a little dose of aggression to the exterior design. Coming further down the side, all the body panels are aluminium, super formed aluminium no less, and when you get round to the back, look at the size of this rear clamshell. Wraps all the way around the back of the car. That is a single piece of metal. And then you've got these buttresses here, which are always a nice touch. And two things to mention on this rear deck. The first is this laser cut cover, and secondly, slap bang in the middle, is what McLaren calls the chimney. It's a heat chimney because down there in the engine it can get up to 900 degrees Celsius, and this just helps reduce that temperature down to about 250 degrees C. And round the back, it's all quite minimal. You've got high set twin tailpipes, big diffuser down the back, no big wing. You've just got this little lip spoiler here. Very restrained indeed. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's a beautiful car. It's well proportioned, it ticks all the supercar boxes, but my worry is they could have gone a little bit further. They could have differentiated it a bit more from the 570S, because if you're a casual supercar buyer, are you really going to appreciate the step-changing technology that's going on under the skin? I'll tell you what though, it's definitely going to turn heads when this glides silently past you, especially in this flux green colour in the supermarket car park. When it's not gliding silently, that new 120-degree V6 can rev all the way to 8,500 RPM. It's also 150mm shorter than the V8, so its mass is concentrated more towards the middle of the car. Steering nerds will be happy to hear the rack is still hydraulic. There's new multi-link rear suspension, adaptive dampers, and Pirelli P0s with an embedded chip that can Bluetooth all your tyre info instantly to the onboard computer. McLaren has even lobbed out the reverse gear. That's taken care of by the e-motor, and a Bluetooth key boots up all this computing power as you approach. So there's no hanging about when you get in. Speaking of getting in, just a couple of things I want to show you on the door here. The first is something called the halo light, which is this ring that runs all the way around the door card. It's not actually working because this is a pre-production prototype, but the idea is this whole ring illuminates, so when you've got your wings up, the doors are bathed in light. Fancy. And the second bit is a nice bit of aero trickery, which is this channel that runs right along the bottom of the door. And what that does is channel air along there, along the sills, inside the sills, and then into this intake here, which feeds the radiators. Clever stuff. Now, this is quite exciting, isn't it? An all new McLaren interior, a properly new McLaren interior. And I'm going to start with the thing that's right in front of my eyes, because you'll notice up here these two little rocker switches. Now normally on a McLaren you have a dial for the handling, you have a dial for the powertrain, and those are activated with two buttons that say active on them, and that's down on the center console. It was always a bit overly complicated, if I'm honest, but they've changed all that and they've moved them up here onto the binnacle, which is attached to the steering column. So if I move the steering wheel, you'll notice the screen comes with it, as do these two switches up here. So the idea is you can keep your hands on the steering wheel but still control your powertrain settings. Switch between automatic and manual. You can turn the ESC off and you can change your handling parameters over here. It's quite neat actually. You see how you just operate them with your index and your middle finger there, but you've still got fingers on the paddles. I've still got a thumb on the steering wheel. All very neat indeed. Now, those driving modes for the powertrain. The first one is EV only. We talked about it earlier, about 20 miles, 30 kilometers of EV only range, 2.5 hours to charge it up, and you can drive the car in pure EV mode up to 75 miles an hour. The next one is comfort mode. That blends the engine and the e-motor for maximum efficiency and comfort and smoothness. And then we move up into sport and track mode, which is all about dialing up the responses, bringing maximum attack. So that will be maximum torque fill with the gearbox and the power delivery. It will be maximum throttle response. They say that the throttle is twice as responsive as it is in the 570S, and maximum regen when you're on the brakes. And just on the subject of throttle response, I think that's probably going to be the defining characteristic of this car, because if I'm honest, the McLaren V8, the twin turbo V8, was always a little bit laggy, certainly in comparison to Ferrari's twin turbo V8, but this technology is going to close that gap and then some. Right, what else can I tell you? Well, in the center here we have a portrait 8-inch screen with all your functions that you need, but here you'll see it's floating, it's proud of the dash. And what that does, as well as looking quite neat, is create a sort of a sense of space and airiness that you didn't get in the previous Sport Series. Just this little bit of space behind the wheel, your cup holder down there, the dash feels further away. It's actually a more luxurious, airy space to spend time in. The materials too. Looks like build quality has gone up a notch, as you'd expect with an all-new fresh start from McLaren. And I must mention these seats here. Now, you can order comfort seats, but these are the Club Sport seats. But don't be put off by that Club Sport name. They're not nearly as ferocious as they sound. You've basically got a fixed ratio between the squab and the backrest here. They move back and forwards manually, and then they move elliptically through an arc. So you can go raise it up, or you can hunker down. Works really nice. The driving position is spot on. I love that the fact that McLaren has stuck to their guns and hasn't peppered the steering wheel with all sorts of switches and buttons. There's a purity to that which speaks to the purity of driving experience that you're supposed to get in a McLaren. Oh, it's just nice to be in an interior in a McLaren that's a bit different. There's even places to put your stuff, unlike the SF90, with a decent boot in the front, a shelf behind the seats, a couple of cup holders, big storage bins in the doors, and electronic luxuries like Apple CarPlay and adaptive cruise control. My only criticism of recent McLarens has never been the way they drove or the way they sounded or the way they looked. All of that is top notch. It's the fact that such a huge range of their cars at wildly different price points, from the 540C all the way up to the Senna, are based around variations of the same monocell carbon fibre chassis technology, the same powertrain technology, the same interior switchgear. But this car is a completely fresh start. It's a new future-proof platform that will underpin a whole family of hybrid McLarens. And it's just the shot in the arm that the company needed. But I need to come back to my original question, don't I? Is this a P1 for a sixth of the price? Well, it weighs about the same as that car over there, and it's got about 3/4 of the power. So do you know what? I think it might be. But then again, I'm going to be a complete cop-out and wait to give you my definitive answer until we actually drive this thing in May. Catch you then.